Good evening, everyone. So today's session is on IIA's certification and qualification programs, and speaker for the day is Mr. NG Shankar. Uh, so about Mr. Shankar Shankar is a coach, mentor, trainer, certified director, and seasoned professional in internal audit and risk management, with experience of approx 38 years in various domain of finance, treasury, internal audit, and worked in two metros of India, Mumbai and Delhi. He is having experience in various sectors such as chemical industries, edible oils, pharma industries, engineering, and most recently, he worked with Aditya Birla Group in corporate audit and handled diversified portfolio. Now he is working as an independent consultant and trainer on IA subject, risk management and governance. He volunteered for Global IIA International Committee for around 15 years, member of IIA Professional Certification Board, and served on IIA Board and Audit Committee. And by qualification, Mr. Shankar is Chartered Accountant and then acquired CIA, CISA, and QIAL certification, and has been awarded Certified Corporate Director certificate. And apart from this, Mr. Shankar authored a handbook on internal audit for company directors and executive management, which was published in March 2018 by Institute of Directors of India. So this is a brief introduction for Mr. Shankar, and I welcome Mr. Shankar to share his thought on the subject of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Mandeep, and welcome all the attendees. It's a privilege to do this webinar, probably the first time that we are doing something on this topic. So this is the IIA's certification and qualification programs. So what we will do today in about 45 minutes is take you through the related topics on what is the value of certifications, what is the vision that we had in the certification department, and also the certification strategy. And then we will look at the four main core certifications of the IIA and deal with it individually so that you get a perspective on what this all means. When I look at the value of certifications, as you have seen, as the introduction was given by Mandeep, I took the CIA sometime in 2001 when I had just spent about 3 or 4 years in internal audit with ABB. And I realized the importance of taking a separate certification that was directly related to internal audit, because by the time I'd made my mind that maybe this was the right domain for me to be in, after spending almost 15 years in finance and treasury and other accounting functions. And so the value of certification is that primarily it brings you a lot of credibility to the profession, because internal audit is a separate profession now, even more so after the introduction of the Companies Act and Section 138. It demonstrates competency, and then you are able to actually do the work anywhere in the world. And I think this is an international global certifications that we are talking about, and which allows you to go anywhere in the world and perform internal audit the way you think it should be done. So quality, and it demonstrates capability, and then you have the knowledge and experience, because the certification basically tells you that you have the knowledge and experience to conduct internal audit. And so we don't have any other such certifications anywhere in the world. The second aspect is on the vision for the certification vision. What was it that the IIA was thinking about? I've been, as Mandeep mentioned, I've been on the international committees for almost 15 years. And I've been in different committees, and more so, I spent 6 years on the standards board, and then the last few years I've been on the professional certification board that looks at the certification process. So typically the certifications are many, and we will come to that in the next few slides. But what was the vision? So the restated vision was that we wanted to create a global certifications pathway that supports internal auditors as they progress through their careers. And this was the clear vision that we had. And so as we go along, we will look at how we have changed over time and what we added and what is going away from the entire suite of certifications. And then the approach that we took for this, in order to execute the vision, the approach that we took was that we will do this in two phases. And then we will position some of the specialty programs in a better way. So you might have heard of the CGAP, the CFSA, and then the CCSA and CPSA and CPEA. So these are all certifications. The first relates to the government auditing professional, then the financial services auditor, and then you had CCSA, which is controlled self-assessment, and then CPSA and CPEA are two related to environment, health, and safety. The first one was process safety auditor, and the second was environmental auditor. So I think if you look at the chart on the pie diagram on the left-hand side, you will see that on the competency side we had two, which was CRMA and the CCSA, and then on the industry side we had the
Excuse me, Mr. Shankar,
yes,
just
yes,
I'm interrupting in middle.
yes.
Actually, your presentation is not visible.
Not visible at all.
Yes,
Is it better
now
now?
it is visible. Yeah,
Okay. So was it not visible right from the beginning or only now? So the vision clearly
yeah, you
stated
can
that we will
proceed.
go. Yeah. The vision clearly stated that it supports internal auditors as they progress through their careers. So on the left-hand side, you would see the pie kind of diagram, which talks about CRMA, CCSA on the competency side, and then leadership you had on the QIAL, which is on the leadership side. And then we have a number of other certifications below, which is largely to do the industry, like the financial services industry and the government auditing professional certification and things like that. So in the phase two, what we are trying to do is we want to realign the core certification programs. And the core certification programs would be the internal audit practitioner, the CIA, the CRMA, and the QIAL. And we will discuss some of these things as we go forward. In the certification strategy, as a successor to what we mentioned earlier about the vision statement, you will see the way the certifications have moved over time. In the beginning, starting with 1974, we had the CIA program. And then in the 90s, you had the CCSA and then some of the environmental audit program, which was actually an acquired one sometime a few 6 or 7 years ago. And then we had the CIA, which has been running right through. So the CIA is the bedrock of the certification, the hallmark of excellence in internal auditing that runs right through. But then we have added a number of certifications in between. So we have had, besides the environmental auditors and things like that, and the CGAP and the CFSA, we've added CRMA, QIL, and then more recently, the internal audit practitioner. So while we had so many such certifications in the kitty, what we are looking at in the next few years is that we will only have just these four certifications, which is the internal audit practitioner, the CIA, the CRMA, and the QIAL. So this program suite that we're talking about is largely looking at these four certifications as we move forward. So let us look at these certifications one by one. Before that, let me also share with you on the experience requirement. The internal audit practitioner uh, does not require any experience. The certified internal auditor looks at 2 years experience. The CRMA looks at 5 years experience. And the QIAL, which is actually a leadership certification, looks at about 10 years experience. And what this means is, what is now the internal audit practitioner? So the internal audit practitioner designation actually was there even now, but it was directly related to the CIA program. So if you did the CIA program part one, and you could not complete the remaining two, then you were actually titled as the internal audit practitioner. But I think what we have now done is we are trying to rejuvenate and redesign the internal audit practitioner by itself and making it a separate kind of a designation, which is at something like a foundation level. Now, whom does this, what kind of people would this be useful for? So let's look at students who come into the profession for the first time, or maybe new auditing professionals, somebody who doesn't have any internal auditing experience at all, although they may be 4 or 5 years in the profession, but they don't have any internal audit knowledge, so they come into the profession at that time. Or somebody who's rotating as an internal auditor. They've been in a different department and they want to rotate for internal audit for about a year or 6 months. And so this would be a very good uh, program for those people who are not permanent, who do not want to see this as a career, but they're really committed to the profession for maybe that period of 1 year or 2 years, or even longer, or maybe for students. And so this internal audit practitioner is something that we are now implementing. And this chart actually gives you the difference between what is currently professed and what is the revised program changes. So if you look at the primary target on the first line, you will notice that the current program is for new and rotational internal auditors, whereas the revised one is also for students, new and rotational internal auditors. As I mentioned earlier, in the current program, if you pass the CIA Part 1 exam, you are able to get this internal audit practitioner designation. Whereas in the revised module, there is going to be a new internal audit practitioner exam. So the exam is going to be separate and not linked with the CIA at all. In the past, we had looked at basic and proficient level, but now you're going to look at both the attribute and performance standards at a basic level. So this is more like a foundational program. And there are small other changes in terms of the duration of the exam and the multiple choice questions. Earlier it was 125, now it is 100. Likewise, you earlier needed 6 months internal audit experience because all this was related to the CIA program, but now there is no experience required. The program window was also again linked to the CIA, which was 4 years, and now we have made it 2 years as far as the IAP is concerned. And then the CPE was an important aspect. In the past, since it was linked with the CIA, the CPE was required for that 1 year extension, whereas in the revised format, it does not require any CPE because it's only a designation. Now, moving on to the what this will cost. So there is a very good introductory offer that the IIA is going to give, and which is for the application you now pay only $50, and then for registration for members you pay only $150, which is actually an introductory price. Maybe at some point later this may go up, but these prices would be effective March because this entire program comes into effect only from March 2020. So let's look at the Certified Internal Auditor program. What does it mean for us? So as I mentioned earlier, this is the only globally recognized program that is suitable for internal auditors worldwide. And basically, it validates that the professional has the required knowledge, skills, competencies, who can perform an internal audit anywhere in the world. And as we speak, every day, CIAs are being added to the numbers. And currently, we have more than 163,000 CIAs in more than 170 countries. So this is the most important and the significant hallmark program that we have in the IIA. As you're all aware, the CIA syllabus got revised last year, which was sometime in January 2019. And so it's almost a year now since the new syllabus has been running. And so all those who register for this particular exam now will actually go through the current syllabus. And so we have now 3 parts, which was also 3 parts earlier, but then it's much more aligned, it's current and focused, and somewhere we have internally looked at synchronization, and then that's how the part one is. Now, part one talks about essentials of internal auditing. So you have the foundations, independence and objectivity, proficiency, QA IPs, quality assurance and improvement program. Then you have governance, risk management and controls, and then fraud risk. And then you have part two, which is the practice of internal auditing, which is managing the internal audit activity, planning the engagement, performing the engagement, communicating engagement results. So this is largely to do with the actual execution of work, the planning process, the execution of work, and also the reporting. Whereas part three is very important in the sense that it builds, it's actually a foundation for part one and part two. So if you have to do the essentials of internal auditing and the part two, you need to know a little bit more about the business. You need to know about the information technology platforms and the way the company is operating. So to that extent, part three has got now four buckets, and this was earlier about eight, and that has been shortened to four, which is business acumen, information security, IT, and financial management. Now, in all these, if you look at the first one has got about 6 areas. The second one and the third one both have 4 areas each. But typically, the type of questions you would get would be dependent on what's the weightage that you give to these topics. So, for example, in part one, the governance, risk management, and controls will have probably more than 30%. And these are indicated in the syllabus. Likewise, in part two, performing the engagement would have much more weightage. So you'll have more number of questions coming around it than the rest. The rest would be probably equal. And then part three as well, you'll find a lot more on business acumen, and then much less on information security or technology or financial management. So while this is the revised CIA exam that is already in vogue now for a year, let's look at what kind of questions and how many questions do we get in each part. So in part one, you have 125 multiple choice questions, 2 hours and 30 minutes. Part two is 100 choice questions and then 2 hours. And then part three is 100 multiple choice questions and 2 hours. So the scoring for each part is on a scale of 250 to 750, whereas 600 plus is required to pass. And once you clear the exam, you get to know whether you have actually passed or failed. And you sit for the exam round the year with computer-based testing. So that's the advantage of this exam, is that you take it in a test center that is conducted by the Pearson VUE. And then once the registration process is completed, then you decide when you want to take the test, and then you take the test, and then you sit for the exam. So the IIA also has created a tutorial for computer-based exam, and the link is given below, where you get to know what is the functionality of the exam, and how do you flag a question, how do you use the calculator, and how do you navigate through the exam papers, and how much time is remaining. And so all this can be done in a simulated environment, so that when you actually go to the test center, you're not really taken by surprise. So you're already through it. In terms of program requirements, the entry requirement for a CIA is that, let's look from the bottom of the table. For an internal audit practitioner, which I just mentioned a little while ago, you can just straight away do the CIA exam. So you don't need any university degree. But if you have an internal audit practitioner, then you can do the CIA. If you don't have the internal audit practitioner, then you need 5 years of internal audit experience before you do the CIA. However, if you're bachelor's and master's or master's degree, you can definitely take the CIA. But then you need an exit requirement. So which means that you can now take the exam, and if you pass that exam, that's fine. But you will be given a certificate only when you complete or comply with the exit requirements. So in terms of the exit requirements for a master's degree, is that you have to pass all the 3 parts of the CIA exam, and then you must have only 1 year experience in internal audit. Likewise, for a bachelor's degree, you have to complete all the 3 parts, but then you need 2 years experience as far as the internal audit experience is concerned. Whereas if you are through the remaining two in terms of 5 years experience or internal audit practitioner, you still have to take all the three parts of the CIA exam. And then in the case of the 5 years experience, you don't need any further experience. But in case you're an internal audit practitioner, you still need 5 years experience of internal audit before you get the certification. And this is actually effective from March 2020. So this exit requirements has been changed, and the entry requirements have been changed to some extent, and this will be effective from March 2020. Now, the pathways to CIA and CRMA are very simply put is if you're a university graduate. So today, if you're a university graduate, anyone in the university graduate can do a CIA. But if you're not a university graduate, so if you're neither a master's or a bachelor's, then it depends on how much time you take. Normally, up to 5 to 7 years to get into a CA program. But now we are saying that in 2020 it will change. That we are making it a little bit more relaxed. University graduates, in any case, can do the CIA, but the others can go through the IAP route. So you can become, if you're 12th standard pass or first year in college, you can take the IAP and then appear for the CIA exam. You don't need a graduation mandatorily. So that's the change that has been made now. And once you do the CIA, you can do the CRMA, because for the CRMA, the CIA is going to be mandatory. So let's look at CRMA. So this is called Certification and Risk Management Assurance. And this is an important certification of the IIA. And sometime I think in 2018, a market study was done. And then in 2019, a job analysis study was done. And based on those studies, the entire program has been revisited, and we have had a look at to say, how do we ensure that it meets the current requirements and what the market wants. And that's why this is an important one, because this is now the only certification in risk management for internal auditors. And therefore, it objectively provides advice and assurance in conformance with the IPPF. And this is because anybody who performs internal audit, I think the central theme is always around risk. So how do you know that you have really understood what are the organizational strategies, the key business objectives, or the risk associated with it? And I think this particular program would give you many insights, and will also give you credibility so that you can perform that work, especially if you have to do an assurance on risk management in the organization. This will always come in very, very handy. So if you look at the current CRMA program, the primary target was actually internal auditors and risk management professionals. And then when we did the job market study and the job analysis study, I think we have now revised the target audience, and we have said this primarily now should focus only on internal auditors. And then a small change has been made on the prerequisite as well, to say, well, earlier somebody with a CIA Part 1 could take the CRMA, which is currently what the status is. But the revised one that will get into effect sometime later this year in October says only a CIA would be able to take the CRMA. The CRMA is also being really made a little bit more stronger and robust. And you might have seen another certification called the CCSA, which is Controlled Self-Assessment. So that we will be doing away with and actually merging it with the existing CRMA program. And that's probably one of the reasons why the questions also have gone up from 100 questions to 125 questions. And from multiple choice, it has gone to a variety of question types. And then we are now focusing only at a proficient level, although currently it is also at a basic and proficient. In terms of work experience, earlier it was 2 years, but now we are looking at 5 years, because in any case, CIA is also mandatory for this. In terms of program window, In fact, both the CIA and the CRMA had 4 years from the date the candidate is approved into the CRMA program, but in the revised CRMA, it's only 2 years. So within a 2 year period, the exam has to be taken. And the CPE requirement, there's no change. It's 20 hours either way, whether the current program or the revised program from October 2020. So the new CRMA exam will have about 50% advanced type questions. And so these are, so you'll have 50% multiple choice and 50% advanced type. And so this advanced type questions could be like categorizing, matching. And I think one example has been given below on matching. You have the months and then you have the different weathers. And so how do you relate the month and the weather? So categorizing, matching, scenario item set, fill in the blanks, multiple choice, sequencing, hotspot. So there are different types of questions that are happening in this besides the multiple choice. So 50% of the paper will be multiple choice, another 50% will be some of these questions. So the new CRMA exam, as I mentioned earlier, is going to focus a little bit more on the internal audit profession, not so much for a typical risk professional, but an internal audit profession who also delves into risk management as part of his work. So it'll look at audit roles and competencies, but I think more importantly, it'll try to find out how he can give assurance on the risk processes in the organization. And so, as this slide also mentions, the CRM exam will be beta tested during May and June and will officially launch on 1st October 2020. So, till the time you have October 2020, the existing CRMA exam would apply. So, in case you register now for the exam, then you would take it based on the current system. But then, if you actually register after 1st October 2020, then you'll have to take the new version. Now, let me look at finally the qualification in internal audit leadership. Now, this is a new certification that came in about 6-7 years ago, and it's an important one to test leadership. So, this is a premier certification in internal audit leadership, and it not just tests the knowledge and competency in leading an effective internal audit activity, but also on governance, risk, and control. But I think what this basically means is that here is a leader who has had the required knowledge, skills, competencies of leading a team, looking at strategy, looking at ethical leadership. And so this is to some extent demonstrates absolute leadership in leading the internal audit function. And in terms of the process, this is a very comprehensive process that has been laid down. And so it's largely, I would say, qualitative, as this slide also mentions. At the first level, there are 3 case studies, or if you have a certain number of years of experience, then that could be replaced for the 3 case studies that you do. And in terms of the second part is that you have to make a presentation to a panel on something that is innovative in the internal audit work that you do. And thereafter, you have a panel interview, which will actually look at you and ask you questions on different aspects of leadership and managing the internal audit activity. What kind of innovation and change has been done? How do you develop audit strategy? And what kind of relationship you have with the organization? How do you motivate the team? And how do you champion ethics and things like that? So the panel interview is also about 90 minutes. And so there are these 3 elements to this, and then one has to pass on this. So with that, I will give this additional final information on the certification and designation. So you have the internal audit practitioner, as I mentioned earlier, the certified internal auditor, the CRMA, and the qualification in internal audit leadership. Now, these 4, as I mentioned, is going to be the core as we move forward. And then there are detailed website references given here so one can access it. We will ensure that all those people who have attended the program today, they will get a copy of the of this presentation in a PDF file, and I will ensure that that is sent to all of you. Uh, and then one aspect I just wanted to mention was that we spoke about the CIA being the premier exam that the IIA has, and a fair amount of the revenue comes from the CIA, which is the hallmark, in terms of excellence in internal auditing worldwide. And I think one of the uh, points you may want to know is what is the cost of the CIA exam. So globally, if you're a member, internationally, one pays almost $900 uh, towards application fee and fee for individual parts. So the application fee globally is about $115, and then you have for each part about it varies from $230 to $280. So that comes to about more than 850, less than $900. Now there is a special pricing for IIA India members, and this is only for the members. And the special pricing actually brings it down to about $640 all told. And this is a great opportunity for members in India to take the CIA exam, because at some point you will need recognition, you need uh, some kind of a knowledge and skills to be tested, and somebody will agree that if you have the CIA designation, it'll really help you to come forward in life. Maybe somewhere in some organizations you get a higher salary as well if you qualify. And there are some organizations that support the CIA designation, so they also do some kind of reimbursement of fees. So you may want to check within your own organization if these are allowed as far as continuing professional education is concerned. So I would encourage that, because when I took the exam, as I mentioned in 2001, I did not realize that how helpful it would be at a later stage. While I got recognized from my organization for what I did, but I think when I got into the board in 2004, in 2006, I got into the board of the IIA globally. There was a requirement that you had to be a CIA to be a member of the board. And so while I did not really target for that, it so happened that I got selected for it. And I represented IIA India for that. So if I had not been a CIA, I would not have got into the board. So it just happened that it gave me that kind of visibility, the networking opportunities to become a volunteer there. And the CIA really helped me. And you always distinguish yourself from your peers, because this is the only certification that tests you on the internal audit basics, the foundational aspects, as also uh, the knowledge, skills, and competencies that you should possess in terms of performing the audit anywhere in the world. So I think it has been a very good experience for me as well, and I hope uh, you will strive to take this exam first, the CIA first, and then once you become a CIA, then you can always take the CRMA as well. So let me, if you have any friends or acquaintances who are students, who are rotational auditors, or who are guest auditors, as I mentioned right in the beginning, the internal audit practitioner would be a very good exam for them to do, and maybe you can encourage them to take that. It's much, much cheaper, as I mentioned in the slide, and it'll be very useful because then you just get the basics. It's something like a foundational program. So with that, I will just rest and look forward to some questions from your end.